So here we are, Super Bowl Sunday, 2 weeks away from the premiere of your string quintet. So you've worked on this piece a long time.
Yeah, I started it. I don't have a lot of time to dedicate to composing because it's not a source of income or anything. So it's really a labor of love when I work on it.
Yeah.
So I'm never working on it because I feel like I need to get something done. It's because I really want to do this.
Yeah.
So I compose because I'm driven to do it, not because... Actually, but that's not entirely true. Before Kaya was born, I felt like I really had to finish it before she was born. Otherwise, I wouldn't ever get it done. So
yeah,
the summer of 2000, the summer of 2021.
Yeah,
I was working hard on the last movement just to make sure it got on the last movement I finished to make sure it got done. When
did the idea come to you to write this piece?
So it started. I always have some ideas floating around in my head. Back from my songwriting days, I'd always have some kind of song idea in my head. This actual piece started, I can't remember what I was playing, but I was either in Boston Phil, which I used to play in, still play in? I don't think I play in it anymore. In Boston Phil, where I used to play.
Emeritus.
And possibly some chamber music. There is some romantic music movement that I couldn't stand.
Maybe by Rachmaninoff?
Maybe by Brahms, possibly.
Oh, Brahms. Okay, yes.
But also possibly, there's a lot of romantic music which I don't like. There's a lot of romantic music which I love also, which is what this piece is actually about. So I ended up, for fun, writing this piece. I had this idea. It started with, I stole the Schubert melody from the trio and thought, what would happen if I turned this into I just decided, I didn't decide to do anything. It's just this idea came to me of a piece that I would like that in a romantic style. And I actually ended up finishing it because it was so fun to write. And that became the last movement. That became the last movement. And then I liked it enough, but I also realized it couldn't stand on its own because it was too romantic. It was it was in a style that I wouldn't take seriously if I heard it, and I didn't think other people would take seriously. Because it's barely neo-romantic, it's just romantic. There are occasional bits of postmodern things in it, but it's mostly just my emulation of what I thought Schubert would do with these ideas.
Yeah. And so based on the early string trio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the melody is based on the early, it's D4/8 something.
Yeah. Yeah. Something like that.
I have it in the score.
So that came first. That came first.
And when I had that done, I had some other ideas floating in my head for things. And I thought, if I actually had this as part of a bigger piece, I could then present it as an actual piece that I would be proud to show people, because they would see that I'm not just doing a romantic pastiche. I can actually write.
And it was originally a cello quintet, the last movement.
Yeah.
It's always been a cello
It started as a cello quintet because the Schubert cello quintet is
right.
the piece.
Yeah. And so that was back in 2012.
That was around the time I first met Lisa. So that's how long ago that was.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And so then did you finish that movement first before going to the other movements?
Yeah, I finished that movement and had it done and thought, because it happened pretty quickly when I finished that.
Yeah.
And then I thought I've always wanted to write a fugue, and I had this idea. So one thing about the first movement is a big fugue, and the first cello has his low C string turned down to a B flat. And one of the parts of it that I had always visioned as part of the piece is about 2/3 of the way through the movement. There's a big cadence where both cellos land on a low C, but the second cello is playing an open C, and the first cello is playing a low C, but it's on where a D would be, and that cello would be vibrating like crazy, and the other person would not be, and you'd hear this.
Yes, we've encountered that in our rehearsals so far. So I see. So that movement came second.
Well, that movement, the idea of that movement came second. That movement took me years to write.
Okay.
That was the one that, if I get this done, I will have a piece that. And so it took years and years to finish that piece, given my off and on working schedule.
Yeah, and it's dedicated to our friend Rick.
Yes.
Baudouin. Did you take some of his, a composer we have known for a long time, Rick Baudouin, did you use some of his compositional language to write it, or?
Not so much. It's just Rick and I have talked about music so much and talked about, we have very similar tastes in what we like. I mean, same as you. We all, the three of us, have very similar tastes. And so Bach, fugues and Bach, and Rick is a professor at Dartmouth now, and has gone through the ringer of academia in a way that I never did, that I did not want to do.
Yeah.
That you didn't even do to that level. And so he knows stuff. And so I can run things by him, and he can give me context quickly. And I dedicated that to him because I was taking this structure that is it's been worked on by so many people and attempted, and there've been good attempts and bad attempts throughout. After Bach, all of Bach's attempts were good. And after that, it's been hit or miss, where people have written fugues, and some of them are good and some of them aren't. And I wanted to write one that was in my style, in a modern style, but still a fugue, and still having all the elements of a fugue. But also, one thing that happens with fugues, even Bach fugues, is you usually have the theme, and the theme has a mood, and that mood pervades the entire fugue. It just sometimes gets huge. It starts like this mood, and then that mood becomes that mood times 5 or whatever. And I wanted this to be more romantic in emotion, where it goes up and down and goes to different places emotionally. So I tried to take little bits of the motifs and find everything I could to turn it into a different emotional world. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I was actually successful at that by the end. But it took me years and years to write.
So let's talk about the middle movements a little bit. What came next?
So I actually ended up finishing the second movement before I ended up finishing the first. And the second movement it's called a canzone, which just is Italian for song. And it actually came from a pop song that I had been writing. And it was just a little snippet of an idea, and I had words to it, but it was just an idea that didn't go anywhere. It was 2 lines and a bass line and the melody. And I wanted to do something, I was thinking of doing something with it more interesting as a pop song, and I never got around to it. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, this is something I could do here in the string quintet.
Yeah.
And it ended up taking the form of one of the prototypical Schubert big slow movements, or second movements. They're not always slow. Particularly the second to last piano sonata, the second movement of that. Mm. The form of this, not really the structure of this is the same, not necessarily the music part of it, but.
Yeah, I see. So that came next. And that's the only one that's not dedicated necessarily to a particular person.
Yeah, it started as a lot of my bad pop songs were some kind of unrequited love song, or a love song for a particular person, and I'm not even concerned about that person. I'm not even sure which person that was for. It might have changed during times. I'm happily married to Lisa now.
Yes.
So that's not a consideration. So it's not, I wouldn't have known who to dedicate it to, except for like this, my past of longing
Yes.
So there's a lot of longing in this piece.
So is it from sort of like almost like a scrapbook of themes you were possibly going to use in pop songs?
No, it's basically one theme. That's the first part of it. And the thing that I ended up doing with it was turning the backing of the theme, where it starts with you and Sebastian plucking. Yeah. And then as it goes along, the second cello comes in plucking also. And what he's actually doing is my version of what a drum fill is in
nice
in a string quintet. Well, that's basically it's going.
Yeah.
And so the different parts, it's like a snare kick, tom, cymbal. That's what that is.
We've discovered this is quite difficult rhythmically. We're working on it. Well, the third movement is dedicated to somebody we grew up with, Dave Walther.
Dave Walther, who's a violist out in LA and also a very good composer in his own right and a very prolific composer at this point.
In fact, we played a piece of Dave's for one of the Fred Kelley concerts years ago, a piano trio.
The piano quartet, we did that with Dmitri.
Oh, piano quartet, right, with Dmitri, sorry, yeah. So yeah, tell me a little bit about the third movement.
So the third movement it's a very standard scherzo trio structure. Its inspiration is more in the Shostakovich, Prokofiev, Rite of Spring area. It's, I think, more dissonant than, I can't tell how dissonant it is. It might just be unlistenable to some people, but it's very rigidly polytonal and off by a tritone. So
yeah,
it's in the beginning, the lower instruments are in E minor and the upper instruments are in B flat minor. Mm-hmm. And if you actually shifted it, it would work very well, but be kind of more boring and less frightening.
Yeah. So you mentioned like Shostakovich, sort of Stravinsky, Schubert as inspirations, Bach. What were some other inspirations that you had in this quintet?
So when I was telling you about the drum fills before, that is definitely Ringo Starr, Beatles, especially in the song A Day in the Life. If you listen to that, the drum fills in that are unlike anything. They're not technically hard. Everybody gets on Ringo as a bad drummer, but it's like calling, since the Super Bowl is calling out, it's like getting mad at an offensive lineman for not being a flashy offensive lineman. Yeah.
Can't say I love, well, we won't go into Ringo, but I can't say I love his solo stuff, but yeah.
As a singer and as a songwriter, there's not much there. There's just not much there. Most of his songs, other people wrote for him, and he was not a strong singer, and he would admit that.
But as a drummer, I see. So that's really interesting. So sort of the drum solos or drum fills of Ringo's was an inspiration in this quintet.
Yeah.
Huh. And particularly from A Day in the Life.
A Day in the Life, the last track on Sgt. Pepper. So
some consider the greatest Beatles song written. Anything else? Any other influences?
So I don't want to give away too much, but I was in high school. You graduated in 92. I
graduated 1 year ahead of you.
And I graduated in 93. So 91 was when the grunge boom happened, and I was all about that when I was in high school. So
Soundgarden,
yes. I've seen Soundgarden live.
Nice.
Multiple times.
Oh.
Chris Cornell died, so I haven't. Oh. But in that last, when they reunited, I saw them again. And he could still hit the high notes, but not quite as convincingly. But he could still hit them, which was impressive. Anyway, so there is a few references to 90s alt rock in there. There's a couple moments in the third movement where there are moments, they're grand pauses, and those are very consciously supposed to sound like bass drops in EDM and dance music, but it's not dance music. That was my inspiration to that. It's a particular moment in a particular not great Stone Temple Pilots song that I loved, and I wanted to get that into. It's a bass drop, but it's in a 90s rock song.
Wow, so pretty eclectic influences. Question often that we talk about at Community MusicWorks in introducing a piece, or how much would it help to contextualize the piece, or could someone just come in and listen to it and get something out of it, or does it need some contextualization? And if they knew some of the influences, oh, this can help my listening experience, or can it stand on its own?
That's a very good question, and that can apply to any piece ever, obviously.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't like to have, I would like to have a piece of music that could just be thrown on and anyone could hear it and enjoy it. But that's assuming that everybody has the same background in music, which you just can't assume. And so this is a piece that if you threw me into it and I just heard it, I would love it. So
yeah,
I'm obviously trying to write something that I enjoy. So
yeah,
if you have some familiarity with the classical music canon, I think you could enjoy it. It's not modern. It's not modern in a way that it's not taking into account that there's some modern music that's trying to just move completely away from everything, and it's a different kind of music than what I'm doing. I'm trying to stay in the tradition. So as I said, all the structures are very similar to normal structures, and quite consciously so. So
yeah,
it's a 4-movement structure, much like a Schubert sonata would be, or a Schubert quartet, or the Schubert quintet,
yeah,
or a Brahms or Mendelssohn or
right,
Beethoven.
Yeah, and has this gotten the creative juices flowing for more music that you might write?
Yeah, but my pace is slow, so I make no promises right now. But I'm working not very actively because I have a little rugrat to run after, but working on another quintet, but with piano and bass, so it's the Trout Quintet.
Oh, sweet. Okay, nice. Will it take quite as long to gestate, do you think, as this quintet, or hard to say?
Hard to say. There's not going to be anything as complicated as the fugue. So I think...
Fugue's complicated.
The fugue is complicated. Yeah, the fugue was like... So I don't know how many people know, but I also have... I've written crossword puzzles. And writing the fugue was like writing a little part of a crossword puzzle every 7 measures. So it was a lot of fitting things. I was trying to keep traditional counterpoint rules intact, even though it's not always tonal.
Right.
But I had set up these rules, and I wanted to keep them going to get get consistency in the sound and the voicing. And so that each voice had something interesting to do, even if it wasn't the main voice.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this will be a world premiere, right?
It will.
Yes. So the Jeff Louie String Quintet, written, actually part of it was written at Apple Hill. I remember Jeff was there, you were writing it in the cabin that I was staying in when I would go teach. You were there to play in the concert, but not to teach, so you would compose.
Yeah, it was one summer where I was just playing and not teaching. So you would go teach, and I was staying in a little practice cabin, so I didn't have a desk or anything. So I would go into your cabin, which had a desk, and I wrote I can tell you which part I wrote at that point. No one who's watching this video is going to know.
Yeah. So, yeah, February 25th, Saturday, 4 o'clock, Bell Street Chapel, world premiere. So pretty exciting. So Well, thanks, Jeff. And yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you for taking the time to learn this unnecessarily difficult piece.
You're welcome.